Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the COVID committee meeting for the 28th of April 2020, and I do apologise that we're running behind. I'm opening the meeting at 6 minutes past 5. That's my fault. My apologies due to a flat battery. So I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We don't have any apologies this evening. We have all elected members of the COVID committee present. If I can go to public question time and receiving of public statements, we do have a response here in writing to Andrew Main, but I just did want to clarify with the CEO, when I read the response to this question, I thought that it was very, very brief and that there perhaps could have been a little bit more detail provided. And CEO, you mentioned to me earlier today that you were happy to elaborate on the responses provided in writing.
Yes, through Mayor Cole, we also have the Executive Director of Infrastructure and Environment who could comment on some of those specific points. The key point for the question is that all our normal services regarding obstructions, footpath maintenance, traffic management, vehicle management, car parking on verges, etc., is proceeding as usual. I think I might have made this comment to the committee a couple of weeks ago that we do have a large number of residents who are spending more time at home during the day, so they're probably seeing the city do its work during the day that may normally only be seen after business hours or on weekends. And I might just ask the Executive Director of Infrastructure and Environment to comment on some of the specific issues around footpath obstruction, council street tree pruning, vehicle management, car parking, etc.
That's really Michael. I think something's been lost in translation. There was a little bit of a longer answer, which essentially is what the CEO said, which is for all these services, it's business as usual. And Mr. Main, he uses the council services quite a lot, so I think he understands the mechanisms, but what we're essentially saying is business as usual. If he reports any of those things in specific areas, we'll investigate and take the necessary action. But we're happy to follow up some of this detail with him maybe tomorrow.
I did just have a question. One of the issues that Mr. Main raised was signposts or light poles erected in the middle of footpaths. That's not commonplace, is it? I noted, for example, when we did the bike lane along Vincent Street just outside here, Loftus Street, that we had to move power poles because they were in the middle of footpaths. But would that sort of be quite uncommon to have poles in the middle of footpaths?
Yeah, yes, it would, Michael. Again, I can see it's mentioned in Mr. Main's question. So if you were to let us know those particular areas, we could look into that. But it is unusual for it to be erected in the middle of footpaths, usually on the edge.
So we could invite Mr. Main to provide the specific locations of things like that, which are more permanent rather than the temporary matters like vehicles being parked on footpaths, etc. Yeah,
that's correct, Michael. And Mr. Main does contact us fairly regularly with specific instances, so I'm sure he's aware of how to do it. So, but yeah, that's the easiest answer. If he contacts us, gives us the specifics, we can investigate.
Okay, thank you. All right, we move on to declarations of interest. CEO, I believe that we do have a declaration for this evening.
Through you, Mac. Could I just say we skipped item 3.A with the public question time. We've got the question from Jess Carlson. Would you like me to read that one out?
So sorry, my apologies. That's very important. We must go back to public question time and then we'll go back to declarations. Thank you, Manager.
So we've received one question from Jess Carlson, who's the CEO of Cahoots of West Leederville. The first question is, are City of Vincent planning to contribute available council resources to help deliver the project more efficiently and comprehensively? For examples are databases of residents, areas at higher risk, so our communication can target those most at risk quickly, providing staff not fully utilised as service delivery volunteers and available venues within City of Vincent. And the second question is, will the city connect Cahoots with other project leaders so we can work more collaboratively and combine our projects wherever possible? And Cahoots and I do have relationships with several of the listed organisations, CEOs and exec teams. However, we believe it would be more efficient if the City of Vincent provided linkages with the aim of providing a more coordinated and comprehensive approach.
Manager, could I just ask a question? Is this in relation to a particular item on tonight's agenda?
Through you, Mayor Cole, sorry, this was the confidential item 10.1.
Okay, thank you. In terms of responding to those questions, it is a confidential item, but I'm not sure whether the question will be able to be provided in the minutes of the next meeting, but perhaps CEO, you could advise.
Through you, Mayor Cole, thank you. I could just ask the manager to comment on that because we would be positively inclined to support the intent of the question from Cahoots to look at opportunities to collaborate amongst all charitable organisations in providing this support, as well as we've made it quite clear that we'd be willing to contribute and coordinate city resources, whether it's staff or facilities or other assets, to help implement some of the initiatives being contemplated during the expression of interest process for the Leadable Gardens Trust funds. I might just ask the executive manager to comment on that to make sure that was communicated to those who submitted EOIs.
Through you, Michael, as the CEO said, I believe we may need to discuss these questions further during the confidential session at tonight's meeting. But following Council's, the committee's decision on this item, we should be able to provide responses to these two questions in the agenda of next week's committee meeting.
Thank you. Was it just the one question this evening? Yes, okay, thank you. All right, we'll go to item 4, declarations of interest. CEO?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we have received one declaration of interest from Councillor Castle in relation to the confidential item 10.1, and the declaration of interest from Councillor Castle is that during 2019 and 2020, Councillor Castle's daughter participated in an unpaid voluntary educational program conducted by one of the applicants for the expression of interest process. That's the only application received or disclosure received.
Thank you, CEO. Council members, are there any applications for leave of absence? No, okay. Confirmation of minutes, item 6. Could I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee meeting minutes of the 21st of April 2020? Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? I declare the minutes carried. Thank you. So that takes us to business arising, and the first item is 7.1, the COVID-19 weekly update. I'll just sort of seek some direction from the council members. Would you like for me to first go to the manager for built environment and wellbeing for an update, given that we've had the new change to move the restrictions from a 2-person gathering to a 10-person gathering for indoors and outdoors? Or would you like to move the item first? Have a briefing?
You get a briefing.
Okay, all right, thank you. Manager, perhaps first we could then just get a bit of a background from you. I know it's very recent, only yesterday, but just implications for the city given the announcement on the 10-person gathering yesterday.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we've seen some great news happen in Western Australia. We've only had 4 new cases in the last week, which is really good. And that includes 4 days where we've had 0 new cases, which has been really encouraging. And as we would all be aware, that resulted in a fairly significant restriction being edited on the weekend to allow us from yesterday to have a gathering limit of 10 people, which previously it was 2. So in terms of the implications for the city, the change doesn't really affect the business community in a great sense, but what it does allow is more people to gather in public open spaces than what there were. So, for example, they can attend a picnic with a larger group of friends, or people can do group fitness training instead of one-on-one training. And of course, it permits gatherings within homes now. So that's a fairly significant step in that not all states within Australia have lifted this limit to above 10.
And just perhaps if you could elaborate, my understanding is that now that we're moving to the 10-person outdoor gathering, that the city will continue to invite personal trainers to hold sessions where they're not sharing equipment without charging for permits.
Yeah, so since that has been, there's been quite a bit of interest in personal trainers and gyms who can't actually operate their gym anymore to be able to operate in a public space like our parks. So there is a permit system in place. For the time being, we're able to waive the fees, but it's still really important that the social distancing requirements are very closely monitored and implemented within the city. There's no changes to what the city is doing in terms of monitoring that and looking at that level of demand. So they are able to operate so long as there's not a clash in times or spaces. They're able to do that so long as they're qualified and provide public liability evidence. So that's pretty much where that is at. Also, weddings are increased from 5 to 10. Sometimes we do have weddings in some of our parks, so that is another change that we're implementing as well.
Thank you, Manager. I might just call now for a move and seconder for this item. Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Castle, do you have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a couple of questions in relation to the implementation plan. I'll start with 2.24 since we're just talking about gatherings. I noticed in the comments there's a noted increased use of the pump track at Britannia Reserve. And that's my personal observation too, that particular park is very busy. I'm just wondering if there's any plan for any change in how we manage that, or is just continuing the monitoring. Obviously the pump track use may drop now that schools are going back. But with this new or an easing of restrictions, do we need to change any of what we're doing to ensure that our public open spaces don't get too crowded?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can make a brief comment, and either the Executive Director or the Manager could comment as well, that I think we have our rangers now visiting all our parks and reserves up to 4 times a day, which would certainly include Britannia Reserve, and we'll be providing the same advice and promoting the social distancing recommendations that have been in place for several weeks, including if they're groups of bike riders congregating in much bigger groups, because of this announcement, that we would still be implementing the 1.5 metre social distancing requirement, as well as that change from 2 to 10. That would essentially mean that we would, in that small space around the pump track, we wouldn't want more than 10 bikes there at any one time, but that would probably be the capacity for that small track as well. I might just ask the Manager to comment on that as well.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, the CEO is correct. We do have our rangers going out 4 times a day and gathering information on these numbers. And we do hear from members of the public as well. When we do receive this information, we're able to adjust how we apply our COVID-based program across the city. So, for example, we started off by having the pavement signage at Hyde Park, and that can be extended to other areas where it's warranted. So I believe that's been considered for Britannia Reserve, and also the amount of monitoring that is occurring and how we manage that as well.
Councillor Castle, did you have anything further?
Gosh, I clicked the wrong button again. I'm sorry. I was just saying that I have noticed the pavement marking is in place in Britannia, so that's that is good to see. But yeah, it is attracting quite a bit of traffic, and that's a tricky one because obviously we want to encourage people to be out and about and getting as much fresh air as possible, but within the restrictions that we have in place. I guess on that point, I had a question around how we're managing these increased applications for personal training, given there may be quite a lot of them rushing to get back, and how we are spacing them out on both time and location. Is there more space available with the sporting clubs not training at the moment?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we do have the coordinator of community partnerships who is in charge of our the booking for our public spaces for personal training or yoga classes, for instance, and I might ask Karen to make a comment on that because those applications have been coming through today and she can explain how we're trying to manage that increased demand.
Through you, Mayor Cole. What we're actually doing is we're compiling a database of all the personal training and group fitness requests that we've been receiving. So what we want to do is have a look at it holistically first and ensure that we're not placing too many personal trainers at places like Hyde Park, which is one of the most popular ones. So we've been doing that today, and we hope to come back to you with a more in-depth answer as to how we're managing this once we get a picture of all the groups that have applied to us.
Okay, thank you. Just another couple of quick questions. In relation to item 2.15, which is the Arts Industry Relief Project, I'm just wondering if we have a timeline beyond the completion of the EOI, which I think was planned to be completed by last Friday. What's the projected timeline for that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I might see if the Executive Director of Community and Business Services attended the last meeting, but she has been on leave for a week, so she may have missed the last meeting. Virginia, do you know?
Welcome back.
The question.
Thank you very much. Look, I'm aware that the committee, or the working group, I should say, is currently finalising the EOI, and with the idea that we get this underway pretty promptly, and the idea is that we are looking to sponsor a variety of artists over a 6-month period, and I would imagine that that's sort of running from as soon as possible, but probably the June to November, July to December period is when we're imagining that the majority of that work will occur. So I'll be able to firm up on the timeframes for you by next week.
Thank you. And one last question in relation to 2.21. In point 4, there's some comment on the health checks that are being carried out on businesses. I'm just wondering how we're going with the database that we were planning to build. I'm assuming that health check comment relates to that, but I just wanted some clarification on where we're at with that.
Yes, through Mayor Cole. The health check does relate to that. We have already built quite an extensive database using the data from Leadable Connect, the Pickle District, or the old Pickle District, and a number of other sources as well. So we have quite an extensive database now. We're still building it, so we're still trying to get some data from some of the other town teams and through some other sources. But in essence, we have a pretty good database going, and we're already using that database to send out emails to the businesses that are on.
Great, thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. I'll go to Councillor Gontaszewski.
Nothing for me today.
Today, okay. Just a question, and I know it's very early days, but in terms of really getting a briefing to the committee next week on what the 10-person gathering rule means for the administration, and in particular the potential reopening of the front counter at the administration building.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we can provide that advice, and we'll have that ready in the papers for Friday.
Thank you. All right, well, moving on then, I'm just having to go between two documents, if you bear with me. The next item, 7.2, community funding for COVID-19 relief for seniors and...
Through you, Mayor Cole, sorry, I think we need to vote.
I'm so sorry, I'm not having a good night tonight. I think the battery has put me on a not good trajectory. Thank you, my apologies. Okay, we'll vote on that item, which is 7.1. All those in favour? And declare it carried. So now, thank you, Councillor Castle. We'll move to 7.2, community funding for COVID-19 relief for seniors and the vulnerable. And have a mover and seconder, please. Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just in relation to item 3, I believe that there was some discussion in relation to the distribution of funds through the, actually perhaps linking this in with the EOI process that we are currently doing, rather than allocating funds from the essentially the city, mixing in the Leederville Gardens funds into our current grant pool. So can I just get some clarification on what the intention is there, and that overall the intention is for this grants is that it would be $5,000 for the $500 amounts is the cap that would be provided or placed upon the distribution of these funds?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I might ask the coordinator of community partnerships to provide a little bit of background about how this request to the committee to amend the policy came about and what we intend it to be used for in practice, and to clarify the split between funding proposed for this financial year as well as the total amount of funding for this program over the next 6 months, covering 2 financial years. Karen, could you just provide a little bit more background to the committee about this request to the committee?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Cole. This request or this amendment to the community funding policy came about a couple of weeks ago when one of our team members received a request from a 90-year-old North Perth resident who'd been living on baked beans and had no support to buy any food. So the community partners, excuse me, looked into this. And one of the team members actually went out and provided food to this resident. So as a means of avoiding that practice, we thought that a good opportunity would be to amend our existing policy. We're planning on up to $5,000 this financial year, with $15,000 put aside for next financial year.
Thank you. And is that 15,000 proposed to be part of the, I guess, overarching bucket for the grants program, or is an additional 15,000 going to be sought for this particular funding stream over and above what's been traditionally allocated to that grants program?
Through you, Mayor Cole, certainly not in addition to the current pool of community funding that is available. We believe that we can either get the money from the Leederville Gardens Trust Fund or through the existing amount of funding that is made available to the community partners for this. We are anticipating that we won't be giving $500 donations direct to residents, that they will be monitored weekly in smaller $50 amounts, not in a lump sum $500 donation. So we will manage that process quite closely.
And in terms of the, okay, so sorry, just let me go back to the actual recommendation. Okay, so item 3, I just want to be clear in relation to the recommendation that item 3 is that the Chief Executive Officer is able to distribute $20,000 of the Leaderville Trust Fund to community organisations or one organisation. Can I just get clarification on that? Because it appears that what you've been speaking about is in relation to the distribution of funds directly to the people that are in experiencing hardship or need, whereas this relates to the recommendation number 3 appears to relate to the distribution to organisations.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I apologise. It is us monitoring an organisation delivering the funds through the Leaderville Gardens Trust funds. But we would work in collaboration with them. They would be responsible for the distribution of the funds.
So how does this then differ from some of the applications that have come in through the existing expression of interest?
Through you, Mayor Cole, this funding policy actually happened at the same time as what the Leaderville Gardens Trust Fund came about. So this was a way in which we thought we could address both of those issues at once.
Okay. Look, I'm overall, I'm very supportive of the intent of this recommendation, of this report. I think that the community partners in this, I guess, this crisis or pandemic that we're experiencing here have, I guess, that frontline interaction with our community. And I'm very supportive of having a policy that allows for the distribution of emergency funds where appropriate. And so I'm certainly happy to support items 1 and 2 in relation to the distribution of the $500 per person grants. And I believe that we would then be after that process is completed in number 2, we would receive a further report to council, and so it would be useful to get the comments and sort of iron out the detail there. In terms of item 3, I think that my preference would probably be to perhaps not muddy the waters here with this, and so I would consider an amendment to remove item 3, but happy to listen to the debate of my colleagues in relation to their thoughts on this item.
As a seconder, Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cole. Look, I agree. I'm very supportive of the concept, the intent of this recommendation, and I think there probably is a lot of value in partnering with an organisation that is better equipped and ready to manage a program like this, as referred to in item 3. But I am somewhat confused by this recommendation, and I think that item 3 probably is better located within the item relating to the Leaderville Gardens Trust. I'm not clear from this whether we have already identified an organisation or whether we will go out and seek one. But in any event, I think it would be neater to talk about the distribution of the funds from the Leaderville Gardens Trust Fund in one item and talk about this policy separately. I can see that the reason for this is to give us a way to deal with this immediately while we go through the process of amending the policy. So I'm keen to hear discussion about how we can still make that happen, but I think I would support an amendment to remove number 3, and perhaps we can talk about how we can incorporate that into the later item when we get there.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. I agree. I think that clause 3 presupposes a outcome from the confidential item, and we need to first establish that we can nominate an organisation that can do this work and appoint them through that EOI process, and then I think clause 3 would then follow on from that. So I agree that this is better dealt with through the EOI process in its known as a holistic manner. And as others have said, I completely support the intent behind this, and I think we will get to the same outcome. It's just really a process issue for me, and I don't think that this will in any way make that happen less quickly, because the EOI process must be undertaken for clause 3 to have effect. So I will support an amendment should one come forward.
Then I would like to move an amendment to remove clause 3 from the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Castle. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Gontaszewski, Councillor Castle. Okay, I don't wish to add anything further. So we'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare the amendment carried. So we're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments on the substantive motion? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. Okay, moving to item 7.3, Library and Local History Centre update. Can I please have a mover and seconder? Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Castle, do you have any comments or questions on this item?
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just very happy to see this update. It sounds like there's been some really creative and exciting projects in the works at the library, and it's good to see the take-up rate. I had one question. There's a discussion about the Books on Wheels service and that eligible residents can email the library to register. I just want to clarify that they have other mechanisms to do that if they don't have access to the internet.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can confirm that they take those requests by phone as well as email.
Thank you.
Councillor Gontaszewski, any questions or comments?
I love the take up of people getting their bags of books, and I just think it's so important just to always add into the debate. A lot of people talk about the fact that libraries are more than books, and maybe libraries these days don't even need books, etc., etc. And I think that the community, how keenly they've taken this up, shows that libraries are also still very much about books, and so it's great to see.
I think this has been an absolute community. I've had a lady stop me in the park to tell me that she got her mystery bag of books and that she instantly loved 3 books. Considered she might read 2 others, that a daughter had found a book that she wanted and that she'd started to read one that she would not have thought she would like but loved it. So it's also just really interesting reading journey for people. Another school friend posted on Facebook that her daughter has discovered the book that she loves most, that of all, with the title, I can't remember, it was a quite hilarious title, but something that she never would have picked up. So it's just really nice for people's reading habits and shaking that up a bit too. But I also just want to commend our library staff, because I think they have been doing a really wonderful job of being really active and engaged online, and it's really nice for people in our community to see all of our librarians friendly and well-known faces from our rhyme time through to things for adults and Lego Club, etc. So just big thank you to the efforts of the library staff who've really adapted well through this time. So yes, that's all from me. Any further comments? Okay, now I'll put the item. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Okay, item 7.4 is the environmental health team update on the COVID-19 response. We have heard from the Manager of Built Environment and Wellbeing. I'm not sure if you had anything specific that you wanted to add for this item, Manager, before we go to a mover and seconder, or if you're happy to just move forward.
Yeah, move forward.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll go for a mover and seconder for item 7.4. Move Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gonchevsky. Councillor Castle, do you have any questions on this item or comments?
Thank you, Mayor Cole. No questions. Just really wanted to say a big well done to our health team. They must be one of the hardest working teams in the city at the moment. Certainly keeping them very busy, and they've really risen to the occasion and reacted very quickly and sensibly to this situation. So thank you for the hard work you've been doing. We appreciate it.
Wholeheartedly agree. Incredibly pragmatic and calm advice all the way through. Councillor Gonchevsky.
I did just have one question in relation to the engagement with businesses that are food-based businesses that are currently operating takeaway services and delivery services, whether there's been any particular health, any issues observed in relation to food handling practices, or if things are going swimmingly. There certainly seems to be a lot of activity in the takeaway and delivery space on Beaufort Street, which is great to see. But I have to say I was conscious of some of the health risks that could come there.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can confirm that things are going fairly swimmingly, which has been a fairly positive sort of transition for the local food industry. I'm glad that it's been noticed.
Councillor Gonchevsky, anything further? Okay, I don't think that the 10-person gathering rule will result in more activity in our town centres and at our local businesses. And I know that some of our local retailers have been planning to extend their hours, or are extending their hours in response to the retailers, that is, that can still operate with people coming into the store. So it's just, I guess it's just for us to continue to remind people that the 1.5 physical distancing remains, even though the numbers of people has extended. So I think that's a really important message, and it's been really good to see the pavement markings extended to some of our other parks, reminding people. I think it's a really good visual reminder that 1.5 metres is actually a reasonable space between people. Okay, well, with there being no further comments or questions, okay, I'll put this item. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Next item on the agenda is announcements by the presiding member. Just very briefly, I thought it would just be worth commenting on Anzac Day this year, which it was very sad that people couldn't gather and attend services. And I think that the silver lining of Anzac Day was there was some incredibly beautiful, quiet moments of reflection, and that a lot of people, whilst they weren't together, I think they did draw out a large number of people to participate. I think the Dawn driveway, Light Up the Dawn message, with people tuning into the broadcast from the War Memorial, had a really big turnout. There were reports from across the neighbourhood. You could hear buglers. There were people playing all sorts of different instruments, lots of candles out. I think it was something that really took off. Our own former councillor Jimmy Murphy played his bugle in Hyde Park. So there were some incredibly beautiful moments happening on the day. And when I went to the Axford Park to lay a wreath on behalf of the City of Vincent at 11 a.m, which is the normal time that we hold our community service, a local resident, Rochelle, had come down to the park to play The Last Post. She's a very excellent bugler, and she played The Last Post while I lay the wreath, and there was a few people scattered in the park, and we all said what a beautiful moment that was. There were poppies that a community member had hung through the trees. So there were these incredibly touching sort of moments on the day, and I sort of think that some of these things may become new traditions, of the poppies, for example, that sort of popped up throughout the neighbourhood. So whilst it was very different, there were moments and parts of Anzac Day that I think were really genuinely beautiful, and would be nice to see some of those things carried forward. That was all from me. Any general business? No? Okay. So that means we just have our confidential item to deal with. So I'll just ask for a mover and seconder to do what we would call go behind closed doors. Move Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? I declare that carried. So for those who've joined the webinar, we do thank you for joining us and for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you next week, same time, 5 p.m. Thank you. So we're back in an open meeting after considering item 10.1, Leederville Gardens Inc. Trust COVID-19 Relief Fund recommendations. This was a confidential item, and the committee has made a decision which I will now read out. The decision of the committee is that that they note the submissions received from 17 registered PBIs in response to the Leederville Gardens Inc. Trust Fund's expression of interest for provision of urgent relief of people in need as a direct or indirect consequence of the conditions imposed by COVID-19, as summarised in attachment 1. 2, as trustee of the Leederville Gardens Inc. Trust Funds, approves the allocation of funds from the Leederville Gardens Trust to Uniting Care West and St Vincent de Paul, subject to the Chief Executive Officer determining the exact amount of funds within the limit specified in attachment 2. 3, notes that the Chief Executive Officer will enter into funding agreements with the organisations listed in recommendation 2 in respect to the acquittal of these funds, which includes negotiating the timeframes, deliverables and reporting requirements. 4, requests that the Chief Executive Officer seeks further information from People Who Care Inc. (Power a Pensioner), Ruhr Community Services, YMCA with a focus on youth mental health and case management, and any further options for provision of food for vulnerable people, and presents this information to the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee meeting next week. 5, approves the Chief Executive Officer seeking and assessing any further applications for funding from the Leederville Gardens Inc. Trust Funds, including liaising with current applicants to refine their submissions with a view of allocating additional funds for medium to long-term relief and recovery efforts in the City of Vincent. And 6, notes that the Chief Executive Officer will provide the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee with regular updates on potential funding initiatives and will present the further recommendations as described in recommendation 4 above for consideration and approval. So that has been adopted by the committee, and there will be a further report to the committee next week. So that concludes the meeting of the committee, and I'd like to thank all attendees and to council members and administration, and declare the meeting closed at 6:45 p.m. Thank you very much.